morning. Today, I offer us all words of inspiration from the late Jane Goodall. Hope is often misunderstood. People tend to think that it is simply passive, wishful thinking. I hope something will happen, but I'm not going to do anything about it. This is indeed the opposite of real hope, which requires action and engagement. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with
Okay, thank you for that. Do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda today?
We have none.
Okay. That takes us right into presentations, and I see we have two listed today. And the first one is on street maintenance program, and it's presented by Chandler Kern. Welcome.
Alrighty, good morning, Commissioners. I'm here to present our annual street maintenance programs. This is 3 different programs we'll be going through, providing hopefully a quick overview kind of methodology of the process, with the main focus on our slurry program that's upcoming. Next slide. Can you get this full screen? There we go. Awesome. All right, so our 3 total annual programs are the slurry seal program, the paving program, the concrete maintenance program. First, I'll go over the slurry. Oh, go back. So the slurry program, that's a maintenance activity, which is a thin sheen over the current paving we have there. This is a very surface level maintenance kind of. Oh, why does it keep changing?
Let's go out of the automatic control. Chairman, we have to work this today.
All right. So it's a very thin surface level treatment on the roadway. This is for roadways that are in typically fairly good condition. Onwards, we have the paving program, which is more intensive. That's a 2-inch mill and pave, perhaps, or a full depth reclamation. What those are is where we're actually grinding down the roadway, say to 2 or 3 inches, and replacing that asphalt layer. And then, of course, a full depth reclamation is where we're digging up the entire roadway up to 12 inches in some cases and restoring the subgrade and everything up to and including the asphalt layer you see on the top. And then finally, our concrete maintenance program that replaces curb ramps, sidewalk, anything that's concrete within the city right-of-way, essentially. And as you can see on the left here, these are addressed on a zone-by-zone basis. So we have 7 maintenance zones within the city. Zone 1 right there is right to the east of Lake Murray, and so we go in an approximately clockwise fashion around the city. And the reason this happens is so that, mainly for the streets, 7 years is kind of the sweet spot in terms of maintenance, where it becomes an optimal point in the lifespan for us to maintain that with the slurry. Next slide. And so then I'll go into some of our street selections, kind of how we make decisions when selecting streets for any given zone. Arterials and major collectors, those are typically a must when we visit any individual zone. Those are high traffic and very high priority for the city to maintain. And then, of course, we measure the pavement condition index, which is almost what it sounds like. It's a 0 to 100 kind of index of how the condition of the roadway currently is, 0 being the worst and 100 being the best. A lot of our streets fall within typically anywhere from 40 to 60 to 70. But there's a lot of variation depending on what area you're in. And of course, we supplement that with the last 2 bullet points right there, our Public Works Operations Field Observations. They're out there every day. They're maintaining anything from our signs to our streets to our concrete. So they always provide very valuable insights when providing what treatments we should do on any given street. And then, of course, finally, when we're actually in-depth planning this project, engineer and inspector will go out there and kind of see if that treatment itself is fitting for that street as well. And so then it's also important to consider what constraints we have when we're doing these projects as well. There might be an upcoming project in the area, either a CIP or a public project or private developments as well. So we don't want to go in and, say, slurry or maintain a street that might end up having some improvements from, say, Helix or SDG&E or otherwise digging it up a year or 2 later. And then the last two go in tandem, the availability of funding and the expensive rehabilitation versus maintenance treatments. Funding for these projects is fairly stable. They mainly come from road maintenance and rehabilitation funds, taxes, some Transnet from Sandag, fairly stable funding sources year by year. But then, of course, the difficult decision comes with expensive rehabilitation versus maintenance. So as I said before, the slurry is a more surface level treatment. It's a cheaper maintenance treatment. Then we have all the way up to FDR and mill and pave, which are more expensive treatments. So the slurry, just to create hopefully a better picture, is about 80 cents to $1 per square foot. The mill and pave, where we're actually grinding down the street and replacing the asphalt, can range anywhere from $2 to $3 per square foot. And then FDR can range upwards of $10 per square foot. So it's a magnitude of about 1 to 10 on a scale there, roughly. Next slide. All right, so finally, we have the upcoming slurry program. This is in Maintenance Zone 2, so this is the middle northern slice of La Mesa. Oh. No, all good. So this is the middle slice of La Mesa. This is around Grossmont Hospital, Grossmont Center, and then the neighborhoods all the way north up to the city limit. This is projected from July to October, maybe even into November, depending on how quickly or how smoothly the construction goes. And some of the major arterials and collectors we have are Fletcher Parkway, Jackson Drive, as it goes from about Murray up to the north city limit, and then Center Drive, Grossmont Drive, and Murray Drive as those wrap around essentially the mall and hospital area. And then finally, some of this scope of work, as you see right here, the highlighted sections could be subject to change. That is because some are selected as alternates in the bid. We have yet to bid this. This will be bid hopefully June this year. And so when those bid prices come in, we have some selected as alternates, which means if the bid prices are too high, those ones can be dropped in favor of our base bid, which we will definitely be doing. But it all depends really on the volatility of prices. Asphalt, at the end of the day, is a petroleum product, so we foresee some price volatility in there maybe. All right, next slide. All right, that concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you got some insight into the methodology, the overview of kind of how we plan these projects, and I'd like to open the floor to questions.
Any questions? Commissioner Nichols?
Good morning. Thank you for that. That was very nice and well done. I think I heard 40 to 60% is, where is the between when you can slurry seal and when you have to do grinding and that sort of stuff? Is there a percentage? I thought I've heard in the past.
A percentage of?
Of the street grade, and this is where my ignorance comes in, I believe I've heard that it's at 60%, but if it's lower than that, then the street has deteriorated to a point where you need to do additional maintenance, which is more costly.
So I want to say approximately 60, I'd say is about the inflection point for slurry versus to milling and grinding down the street. But then it transitions, say, to a mill and pave, which is 2 to 3 inches until, and I have to verify this, but about, I want to say 40 on the PCI. That's where we consider more extensive treatments like an FDR.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify for my own knowledge and such like that. The second thing is that I have been an advocate of the complete streets, and to avoid the cost of, or lowering the cost, a lot of this should be done during the repaving of streets and things along that line. Specifically, the METCD points out intersections as being a potential problem place and a place that could be upgraded. Is there plans to do any upgrading for the lining? Really, it's just paint on the ground of.
So specifically for the striping, or you mentioned intersections as well?
Rather than doing the striping as it has been done, to update it to today's standards.
Yeah, so at least with this project, we do have some new striping going in. For a majority of the striping, it is replace in kind, so it's essentially being replaced, but we do have some updates, particularly along Jackson Drive as it enters near Murray, where we're hopefully dieting that road a little bit. As well, I'm coordinating with the project engineer for the Mesa Bike and Sidewalk to incorporate some of those changes in this year and in the following, hopefully two and into the future years for that. But I can give you her information so she can paint a better picture of
right.
perhaps what we're doing upcoming.
I can give you more specifics. Of an example would be the Fletcher Parkway crossing Jackson. There is a right turn only lane, which as a cyclist coming off of a Class 2 bike lane, there's a conflict and green conflict striping crossing to that. But the other problem that comes about is for the motorists, and that is that a cyclist, if they don't have a place to go, they will stop in the right turn lane, which then impedes the traffic of vehicles who would wish to turn right. What the MTC now is pointing out is to place a bike box in front of the rightmost through lane, which allows then for a cyclist. Knowledge is everything. Education, teaching people where to go and how to do it is the forefront of everything along that line. And that's the type of thing that I'm looking at as updating to the current standards. And I actually wrote up a guideline for that type of thing, which I'm going to pass out, and you're welcome to view it as you see fit. But that would be a real upgrade to the safety of the city's residents, both pedestrian and cyclists.
Yeah, we could look into that. We do also have to vet any striping changes with our traffic department, so they do have say in what we
Right.
ultimately implement.
Yeah, the city has adopted the complete streets, and so that would be something that would be warranted.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Justice?
Thank you, Mr. Kern. Really appreciate that. Couple of questions. First of all, with all the building that's going on in our city, we have some areas that are really getting torn up. I'm speaking pretty much like Spring Street at Pasadena, where we have all the work going on at the staging area. A lot of big trucks coming in there. Same thing with what's going on at Grossmont Center with the upgrades there, Grossmont Hospital with all the work they're doing. Just wondering, I know you send out Public Works to go and do the field, you know, and see if we need more, but is this something you could ramp up in light of all this? This is kind of unprecedented building we've got going on right now. So wondering if you foresee doing extra vigilance on that, because we're already seeing a lot of destruction, only because that's what happens during construction, right? So wondered if that was going to be addressed.
So ultimately, in terms of the hospital, that one was brought to my attention fairly recently. I know they're doing a development in the middle of the hospital complex right there. So in terms of that one, it's really about the timing. We're hopefully going in there this summer, but we don't want to do some work that ultimately they might rip up in the future. So that's something we're still considering at the moment. And we still do stick to the zone-by-zone basis, apart from maybe an extraneous circumstance. And as well for some of these private developments that are ripping up the road and implementing utility lines. I know our community development department does sometimes condition them to repair the roadway after their work's completed.
Anybody else? No, actually, I had one kind of interesting question. Now that we've got a lot more electric vehicles coming online, and as the fleet transitions to more of those, do you foresee the 7-year maintenance cycle being, I guess, sustainable over time, or do you anticipate, because of the heavier vehicles and the more wear and tear on the roads, that you might need to accelerate that schedule at all in the future?
That's a good question, because I know that electrical vehicles are quite heftier than a regular traditional gasoline vehicle. So ultimately, that depends on maybe how much money we have available in the future, and if we get directive from management to perhaps maybe shorten it to like 5 or 4 zones at the end of the day.
Okay, just a consideration. Anybody else? Well, thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next up on our agenda is another presentation, and this one is on the La Mesa Trolley Prioritization presentation by Cecily Taylor of Sandag.
Well, I'm not Cecily
Well.
Taylor, but good morning, everyone, and I'm here to introduce Cecily Taylor. As some of you may know, Sandag, along with the other stakeholders, including City of La Mesa, has been studying how to prioritize the downtown trolley system. And Cecily Taylor, Regional Transportation Planner with Sandag, is here to present that.
Okay, good morning. All right, so why don't we go ahead and go to the next slide. Let me start with a recap of why we did this study. As part of meeting our region's vision for a strong multimodal transportation network, the regional plan identifies increasing trolley frequencies on the Orange Line to have trains come every 7.5 minutes. But as there's more trolley service, that means more trains crossing through La Mesa, which would further delay people on the roadways. So with this in mind, while La Mesa recognized that the nearly 3,000 passengers that use the trolley at the Spring Street stations and La Mesa Boulevard stations will benefit from that service increase, and that'll bring more riders in the future, the city also wanted to make sure that there could be a balanced transportation network through this city. And with that in mind, La Mesa City Council asked staff to partner with Sandag to perform this study and look into solutions to alleviate traffic concerns. And actually, if you can advance to the animation, we partnered on a grant and were successful in getting a Caltrans Sustainable Planning Grant to take what was really just a first pass at developing some preliminary concepts to help with that balanced transportation network. So I do want to emphasize that these kinds of projects take quite a long time. This is the first step. But for example, Chula Vista and Sandag partnered previously to look at grade crossings in that city. They completed a first study in 2012 to look at 3 different grade crossings in Chula Vista. One in particular, Palomar Street, was identified as a priority, and an additional study developed that concept further that came out in 2020. Now, the concept that project has just recently been environmentally cleared, and there's about 6 years remaining to do final design and construction. So just to give you a sense of the path ahead. But for our study, if you can go to the next slide, please, we're focusing on this downtown area of La Mesa, where the trolley runs right parallel to Spring Street, between around that El Cajon Boulevard overpass and the I-8 off-ramps, continuing south to about Lemon Avenue. There's 5 at-grade crossings through this section. Next slide, please. Last time I was here, I presented what are basically the basic options we have for separating the trolley from the roadway. You can either raise or lower the trolley, or you can lower one or more roadways. And with this study, we also wanted to be sure to identify some short-term enhancements that could be done much more quickly than these more complex projects. Next slide, please. We took these basic concepts out to the community in the fall to get their input before we got too far along in any design. And what we heard from the community is that there's a really strong priority to maintain the character of the village, as well as maintaining access to all of the businesses and events that happen within this downtown. There's also, we heard a lot of interest in that multimodal connectivity and safety through the village. This also includes maybe personal security concerns. When we talked about that trench idea, some did bring up the possibility of vandalism or encampments, and that's certainly a consideration. There was also interest in potential new public amenities that could be part of this project. I'll touch on that a bit more. And finally, there was concern about the potential road or trolley closures during construction. Construction is always difficult. Based on this public input, as well as early coordination we were having with our technical project partners, at that point, we did decide to eliminate the roadway trench concept, at least for the purposes of this feasibility study. From that early work, we thought that that roadway trench would be the most disruptive to connections within the village. It also seemed that it would mostly benefit those who are traveling through the village rather than really visiting the nearby businesses. And the community also expressed the most negative feedback for that concept, so they seem to agree with those points. But with that, next slide, I can share some of the more fleshed out concepts that we worked on. So first, in terms of what we could be done in the near term, we came up with, you might say, a menu of options that could be done individually or in combination, maybe aligned with other projects in the area. But these are things like improved rail crossing equipment that can make it harder for someone to get around barriers and end up on the trolley tracks when they shouldn't be there. There's also certainly an opportunity to continue to improve the signal timing. The city's actually already working on some projects to try to improve traffic flow through the area. And we also identified maybe some new pedestrian connections. Today, the east side of the trolley platform heading towards Allison Avenue just comes to an end. You could maybe fill that in with a sidewalk to provide a more complete connection, more convenient connection for anyone heading to the east from the trolley station. And while it would be certainly a more expensive option, maybe a pedestrian and bike bridge over Spring Street could give people walking and biking an option separated from that heavy traffic roadway. And on the next slide, getting into some of the more significant trolley grade separation concepts. First, presenting the elevated trolley. So here, the trolley would be raised into a guideway. We see similar designs on the Blue Line extension through UTC or for parts of the Green Line. And hopefully this mock-up gives you a sense of what that would look like. In this case, there's some space constraints that would require the trolley station to move north just slightly to the north side of Allison Avenue, really kind of in line with the Civic Center parking lot right near us. And in this case, we are able to fit the trolley guideway over the I-8 off-ramp intersection. That intersection would need to shift south slightly, and at the same time, that El Cajon Boulevard overpass would need to be raised slightly. So it's not an easy feat, but we do think it's possible. Now, the next slide, I wanted to give a rendering of what this would look like. So starting with the photo today, but if you advance again, you can see what this structure could look like through or along Spring Street in the La Mesa Boulevard crossing, for example. We definitely heard concerns from the community that this is a significant structure that would be running through the village. And while that certainly is the case, hopefully this gives you a sense of what the scale would be. It's definitely a big change. But one positive I want to point out is when you're raising the trolley, you're now opening up new space underneath. Underneath that guideway could be an opportunity to implement maybe certainly new walkways, maybe some kind of plaza areas, maybe landscaping, even small shops could fit under there. So just something to consider. The next alternative is lowering the trolley below the roadway in a trench. In this case, we would also need to move the station a little bit north. The cross streets, we assume, would all have bridges over the trench. And we can't quite manage to fit the trench under those I-8 off-ramps while still meeting with the current trolley bridge over the freeway. So we would need to leave the I-8 off-ramp intersection or rail crossing as an at-grade crossing. And we can go to the next slide for a rendering again. In this case, imagine you're walking along the sidewalk looking north, and if you advance, you'll see that the trolley, as well as all of the overhead wiring and poles, are moved down into the trench. You can really only see into the trench when you're standing right next to it. You can picture as you get farther away, you would just see maybe the short wall and fencing, whatever that design would look like. And lastly, for a third option, we wanted to consider maybe a scaled back version. So in this case, we thought about what it would mean to focus just having grade separations at the core of the village over Lemon Avenue and La Mesa Boulevard. In this case, you would need to close the west side of Allison Avenue, make that a cul-de-sac, and then just to be straightforward, the University Avenue and I-8 off-ramp, while those are high-volume roadways, those would remain at-grade crossings. And in this case, the station would need to move south just to the other side of La Mesa Boulevard. So that gives you a sense of the different concepts. If you go to the next slide, wanted to share what we found when we compared each of these against a set of evaluation criteria. These were developed early on through working with our technical project partners. That was the staff from La Mesa, of course, as well as MTS and Caltrans. And we tried to capture the various goals of the project, thinking about what would be the result when the trolley service was increased, trade-offs associated with each of the concepts, and we came up with these categories. And what you're seeing is a heat map, sort of conceptual evaluation. So there's a lot of different factors baked into this, but I'll try just to touch on the main takeaways. And you can find the more detailed analysis in the project report that's linked on the slide as well as the final slide. So the first row for user experience, that's thinking about what, just for the everyday visitors to La Mesa and residents of La Mesa, what does travel through this area look like? And grade separation would definitely do the most in terms of improving safety and reducing delays. The fully grade separated options perform best. The near-term improvements provide only an incremental change, and then when you're thinking about increased trolley service, that would mean more delays. The next row is for the operator's perspective. So in this case, there's a simplified signal system. The buses are operating better with that grade separation, but we do need to acknowledge that there's increased maintenance costs associated with having elevators and added security at a grade separated station, in addition to maintaining the structures. The next row, project viability. The near-term improvements are certainly the easiest to fund and construct. The full grade separations are much more complex and expensive. And in this case, the trench is most complex just because of the amount of excavation needed and relocating the utilities that today are underneath the trolley. Community considerations was meant to capture what you might say are like indirect effects of the project. So the kinds of factors that an environmental impact study would look at, consideration of new community amenities or the existing community resources that are right next to the trolley, the historic train depot and the Vietnam Memorial. So there's definitely a lot of factors there, a mix of pros and cons. In this case, the aerial guideway performed slightly better as we thought about how there's just a lower environmental risk associated with building up rather than excavating. And there's also that opportunity for new community amenities underneath the guideway. And then economic and land use. None of these concepts are really introducing opportunities for new development, nothing significant, but we did note here that shifting the station closer to the Civic Center here could have, there could be potential shared uses with that Civic Center site redevelopment. Underneath the guideway, again, there could be some small shops that could benefit the local economy. And we noted here that adjacent landowners would benefit most from the trench concept because of the reduced visual and noise effects of lowering the trolley. And very critically also on the slide is the cost of each of these concepts. So near-term improvements, we assumed that several of those could be implemented together, not the pedestrian overpass because that would be kind of a different price point, but of the other things that several of them could be implemented for this cost. For the others, the trench, as we expected, is the most expensive. The aerial rail guideway comes next, and the shortened guideway is less expensive again. So just high-level takeaways. Those near-term improvements do offer minimal benefit, but would be the easiest and cheapest to implement, and they could be done in the interim while we wait to move forward with other concepts. Full grade separations have the most benefit, and the aerial guideway did seem to perform better, but the trench does have advantages related to reduced noise and visual impacts. And the shortened guideway, of course, doesn't offer quite as great of benefit, but it would be a lower cost and therefore more feasible. Next slide, please. So what happens next? Again, this was really just our first pass. Any additional work would require a real funding strategy. There are various funding sources that relate to improving safety or improving air quality, but I think we have to acknowledge that this part of La Mesa, there was really not a history of severe crashes, and the timing of the trolley service improvements is uncertain. So that would make this project really difficult in terms of competing in these discretionary grant programs. And it's also important to note that SANDAG is just starting a region-wide grade crossing study that will help us decide as a region where is the highest need that we want to focus our resources. So there's certainly more conversations to come to see where these crossings in La Mesa land on the priority list. But if, assuming that funding was identified, next steps would be to continue refining the design. Again, this is all very preliminary. I think La Mesa would also want to do a more detailed alternatives analysis to really dig in and weigh the trade-offs and benefits of each concept and ultimately select the preferred concept that could move into an environmental analysis. I think as part of that design, it certainly would be important to consider how community comments could be addressed, so maybe some kind of architectural features or, again, those public space opportunities. The public comments did include mention of a lid over the trench, but that would continue to increase costs pretty significantly. And of course, with any environmental analysis, Also identifying a appropriate delivery method that could balance the cost and construction duration with the impacts to the community. But with that, final slide, we hope that this study provided some valuable insight and could give the city of La Mesa a clear picture of those options and trade-offs and the scale of investment, and could be a foundation for future decision-making when those funding opportunities are identified. And I want to thank La Mesa staff for being such a great partner on this study. Any questions?
Questions from the commission? Commissioner Justice.
Just curious, are any of these designs taking into consideration the fact that we have freight trains that use this? So can freight trains use the?
Yes, we confirmed it's one freight train a week that runs, and we confirmed that it's a shorter train, so the grades that the trolley can meet, that freight train can also use that.
Okay.
The structure just needs to be a little bit more robust to handle the weight of the freight train, but that was included.
Okay. The other question I had was about the trench plan. That seems to be open air. Is it
Yes.
is it considered a tunnel when it's like the green line that goes through SDSU where you're going actually into the underneath?
I would say it's more of a trench, open air trench, not necessarily what you would call a tunnel that's covered on top.
San Diego State, is that the only quote-unquote tunnel that we have within the MTS trolley?
I believe so.
Okay.
Downtown is trenches.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Commissioner McLeese.
So I'm sure it's embedded in here, but I just want to make sure that it's more obvious to myself and maybe others who care about this part, about the increased mobility and I guess less slowing down of traffic and pedestrians waiting to go from east to west in La Mesa. Option 1 and 2 seem like vast improvements with that, but a scale as far as like improve mobility for others. I know a lot of, well, I have a young motorist at home, and there's a lot of confusion about where to stop and the safe places to wait with trolley crossings. So I'm guessing 1 and 2 completely would alleviate my young driver's concerns with that. And so I think just pulling out that a little bit more about the improvements of how it will impact us from east to west and less time delays. And then I know you mentioned not so many collisions or vehicles, maybe not exactly at those crossings, but I know this commission talks a lot about Spring Street. And so if I am late for work and I've had to wait for the trolley and now I'm heading towards the freeway, those impacts could be downstream from this. So I would suggest expanding and looking at that data and incorporating it, that it is likely connected to this as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the alternatives analysis could get into a lot more detail than we were able to do with this study, but certainly.
Yes, Commissioner Sum.
Great, thank you so much for the presentation. Do you have a sense of sort of the La Mesa stops sort of contribution to the overall network? You know, how many passengers are coming through relative to the overall network, high, medium, low, kind of order of magnitude? And in other words, like, is La Mesa more of a conduit, or is it, you know, or is it really being heavily utilized, you know, kind of like sub-regional in here?
Yeah, I understand the question. I'm not sure off the top of my head. The station utilization, I would say, is it's on the lower side. But that being said, the number of people who are crossing through La Mesa is certainly, there were some concepts around, like, well, do we even need the trolley to pass through, or could it stop? And when we looked at those numbers, that really wouldn't make sense.
Got it. And then on just another note, the vertical components, even though they are sort of, you know, $100-200 million less, I mean, was there what sort of analysis went into the visual impact of that? And scale, I mean, because some of it feels like it's, you know, it could be subjective. So, and it's a very hard thing to do, right? But, you know, it's when you get to that level of order of magnitude, it's sort of, well, what's another 100 million? And I understand that, but it's just vertically, it would really radically, at least in my opinion, change the character of the area. So more kind of a question, but kind of a statement too.
Yeah, absolutely. And at this point, we really could only be a bit subjective and conceptual, but there could be, maybe there are ways that La Mesa would want to quantify that more specifically. Environmental analysis could look at that.
Anybody else? Well, I have a couple of questions for you. First, when you were showing the concepts of either up or down, the stations would have to move a little bit. I
Yeah.
just was curious as to why. And then
Yeah.
as a follow-up to that, I just want to make sure that those stations would be fully ADA compliant and have all the elevators and all that built into the cost.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes, to the second one. To the first question, today the station is right next to a private development, right? And when we're thinking about the service operating during the construction, we have a temporary track, and so we're trying to fit that in. But in order to maintain service and construct a new station, so during the construction of the station that you can't really be serving that station yet, that's why moving up to this public right-of-way and using the parking lot area we thought would be the best option.
Okay.
But that could be looked at further.
And you had one version where it was actually moving a little south, too.
Yes, yes.
And that's to get away from that brand-new apartment building, I take it.
Well, in that case, it's because we're only starting grade separation at Allison Avenue, and again, trying to fit in that shoe fly. The station can't move north, but it can't stay where it is either, so.
That was the shorter one.
Yep.
When you were doing the analysis, I assume you did some kind of noise analysis?
Not a detailed noise analysis. We know that if the trolley's in a trench, noise will go down.
Yeah.
If the trolley's raised, we have the benefit of we're not having the gate noise or the train honking, but we know that kind of the rail noise will increase, but we didn't do a detailed analysis, no.
That would come, I guess, when you're talking about moving to the next phase and alternatives analysis.
Yeah, it could be alternatives analysis if it's something that's, La Mesa would think is a high priority to bring into that weighing trade-offs, or if it's not done, then it would certainly be done during the environmental impact analysis.
And then finally, with the trench alternative, where the rail would be in the trench, you precluded any kind of covering of the trench, and I was just wondering, is there like a ballpark figure for doing that for like a block or 2 blocks or by square foot, or
Yeah.
some way to, as you pointed out in this, gain some land back
Yeah.
in that case?
I can't really ballpark that, and part of the reason is our design assumed open air trench, and if you wanted to put a lid over it, you would need to dig deeper. So it has a bit more impact than just figuring out the cover. You would need to kind of revisit the design and dig deeper for that portion. And again, we're having some space constraints. So for
Right.
this, we kind of put it to the side, but that could be looked at in the future.
Yeah, when you get into that alternatives analysis, that would be good to know just from a cost perspective. 'Cause
Absolutely.
I'm sure it's going to be very significant.
Yeah.
I think those were the questions I had. Commissioner Nichols.
Real quick, and I know this is a challenging question, but is there a projected timeline of what you would like to see happen on this project?
I think it really comes down to better understanding when Orange Line frequencies can realistically increase. It's in the regional plan, and the regional plan does consider financial constraints, but looking at the funding for operations, transit operations today, it just really doesn't seem like something that can happen soon at all. That being said, the project itself would probably take 7 years to construct, so we certainly want to be proactive about it, but it's hard to say.
All right, thank you.
You were talking about the regional plan and the Orange Line upping its stops and starts. Is nothing going to happen with that until we have some sort of plan in place? Or are we going to see more stops and starts and more traffic? I'm just wondering, because
Yeah.
you mentioned the kind of stopgap measures we could put in there. I don't know if that's a good
Yeah.
use of money, but if we're going to be faced with a greater frequency, it might be something we should consider.
Yeah, I think there's really nothing technically that says that trolley service couldn't increase before then, but of course, we're all partners, and so I think it would be a conversation of weighing what we would get from having increased trolley service and meeting regional goals in terms of reduced greenhouse gas emissions and all of that, but also understanding that it would be very impactful to La Mesa. And that's part of why we're doing this region-wide study, is because we're hearing from a lot of our cities that they're concerned about increased service, all throughout the transit network and the rail network, and wanting to make sure that the traffic impacts we can be proactive about that.
And they're even talking about building certain sized buildings close to trolley stops. It's all
Yes.
one big, there's a
Yes.
lot of pieces in that jigsaw puzzle.
Yes, there is.
The other question I had was, this is just downtown,
Yes.
correct? This is not south where Spring Street Station is?
No, the project footprint would extend a bit south of Lemon Avenue, but we weren't looking at making any changes down by Spring Street, no.
Okay, because we did have, not too long ago, a presentation on what could happen with development of the Spring Street Station.
That's right, and we also had a presentation regarding a potential rail trail along.
Yeah, and that was my next question.
All the way up.
Okay.
That's, I guess, more for city staff is, if this moves forward, try to bake that in.
Yeah, definitely.
Anybody else? Any other questions, comments? No, seeing none. Thank you for the presentation, Cecily.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, thank you. Coming back to now our agenda, do we have any general public comments today?
No comments.
Okay. How about for the board, do we have any conflict disclosures related to the two business items that we have today? Seeing none, okay, let's move right into the current business. First off is approval of the minutes from the Mobility Commission meeting held on Wednesday, March 4th, 2026. If anybody had any concerns about the minutes that were in our agenda package? Seeing none, I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Okay, we got a motion to approve and a second.
Chair Calandra, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Justice, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Mueller, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Nichols, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Sumner, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Cavello, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner McLeese, how do you vote?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Okay, good, thank you. Moving right along, next up is approval of the 2025 Neighborhood Traffic Management Program, the annual report, and the 2026 work plan, and I'm assuming we have a staff report.
Yes, Commissioners, I'm going to walk you a little through this staff report. We have a lot of streets, as you know, and I'm going to try to make this meeting as brief and not hold you here for an hour and a half. But I do want to walk you through some of what's going on in this next year and what we've done in the past, because I think there's some highlights and there's some things we really want to prepare you for. So first of all, I'm not going to touch a lot on the traffic calming phase 1 items that we did in this past year. You're welcome, though, to bring up as questions and answers if you have a particular street that you're concerned with. I am going to jump right, though, to the phase 2s and the phase 3s because they're a little bit more impactful in the neighborhood. And so in this past year, we met on 2 streets, and these streets were Lois Street and Dugan. And I did have some support from the commissioners. I do want to say my appreciation for you coming out and meeting with me and supporting me. You had a chance for you to see us meeting with all the residents right there on the street at a couple of meetings. But just so the rest of the commissioners can catch up, we go out during our phase 2s, and that's really our outreach phase. We go out, we meet with all the residents, and they really provide a vote. So at the end of this, they come up with the design. They really have their own ideas about what they want in traffic calming, whether it be speed humps or something else. And we really work with them to come up with a plan. And then they vote on that plan and approve that plan. And we were successful in both those phase 2 projects in getting the vote. So those projects are moving forward, and I'll touch on that in just a moment. In phase 3, that is a construction phase. So that's when we go back to city council. We ask for the money, and we build the projects. In this case, we have 2 projects that were approved in this past year, and that was Highwood Avenue and El Paso Street. And I want to let you know, we are actually in construction on both those. We actually have the project manager here. So Brianda Delatorre is leading that charge on the construction. So if you have a chance, I do encourage you to go out to those streets and see what we've done already. So Highwood in particular just got its chicanes installed. We have not installed chicanes on a slope of that nature. That was something new. So we do have a new concept on that. In addition, there will be a speed table on Highwood Avenue. And then on El Paso Street, probably even a little bit more exciting, we're going to have our first roundabout. So that roundabout will proceed with the construction during the summer. That will be at El Paso at Laird. So if you have a chance this summer, please go out and take a look at it. Again, first roundabout in La Mesa. So that's kind of what happened this past year. So we're still trying to finish off what we started last year to get it done. So we hope by the end of summer, those will be completed. Now kind of jumping to the work plan. So that's 2025, kind of a look back on what we're doing currently. Then we have the work plan, which is what we intend to do over the next sort of fiscal year. It's kind of a full fiscal year. It takes us about a year to do all this work. The phase 1, we have only a single phase 1 project right now we have planned. It's a big one. It's more of a study. And it's at Lake Murray Boulevard. And this is between, if you're familiar with this area, it's between Marengo and Dugan. It's a complicated area for us. It's not a simple solution. Anyone who says it is doesn't know the traffic engineering challenges that poses. We are looking at potentially, we've tried to integrate a bike lane in the past and have been not successful because we have a parking and it's a residential zone. So normally if you go down Lake Murray Boulevard, you're primarily in a commercial zone, except when you get to this section, you drop into a residential zone. You'll see houses on both sides of the street. This is somewhat of a challenge for us, and it's going to be a study, and we're going to take a look at that. We'll bring that information back to you as we get closer to that study. So we will definitely keep the Mobility Commission involved when we get closer to preparing that study. But that's our big phase 1. Our phase 2, these are our 2 next streets on our priority list. That's on our matrix. So if we were to go down, and maybe I'll just quickly jump to our matrix so that you have an idea of why these 2 streets got elevated to phase 2. So again, if you were to look at our matrix, and now we've colorized it and we've added some extra graphics, council asked us to put a little more detail into how the residents could see this. So if you look on the far right, you'll see we have a graphic of what a phase 1, now a phase 2, and a phase 3 is. We haven't had that in the past. So this gives an idea of what those three phases are. So in terms of how streets are looked at, who gets first choice, who gets second, it's based on quadrants, again, as we've mentioned before. So the quadrants that are the highest, or the quadrant 1 streets, are streets that have, when we've done data studies, have both speeds and volumes that exceed our policy. So the speed is 7 miles an hour. If we get the 85th percentile of vehicles when we go out and do a study, or over 7 miles an hour over the speed limit, these streets jump into quadrant 1. So the thing that's kind of about proud to say is, as of this year, for the first time in 30 years, we will not have a quadrant 1 street in La Mesa, at least without a restudy. So we will have finally knocked out all quadrant 1 streets. So we are now down into quadrant 2. So quadrant 2 streets are streets that are still getting speeding, but they don't have the volumes. So these are streets that when we go out, and where this becomes a challenge and why I want to bring this up is the next 2 streets are the 2 streets that we're going to be seeing this next year. We're going out to do phase 2 are Bob and Jesse. Challenges with streets when they're into quadrant 2 is there's not as much volume. That's a perception issue, especially for residents. There might be a couple of high speeders, but the residents will say, they may just come back and tell you, I don't see a lot of cars doing that. So it's more of a challenge to work with residents to make sure they're all on the same page when they vote for a traffic calming design. So I do want to make sure the commission is aware of that. So the 2 streets are going to be Bob and Jesse. Right here, Bob and Jesse are going to be the next 2 streets, and they will be elevated to a phase 2 review over this in the fall. And I'm going to jump back to the report real quick. All right. And then finally, our phase 3s. are going to be Lois and Dugan. So the ones we just did phase 2 on, they're going to be elevated to phase 3. And both streets chose speed humps. Dugan has 6 speed humps down the street, and Lois has 4. A new element, and I want to alert you, the group to this, I know most of you may be aware of this, but City Council got involved in this project as well. And they added a temporary speed hump program. So we have a new program that sort of began to sort of merge a little bit with our phase 2 streets. That is that Lois and Dugan became eligible for temporary humps while they were waiting for the permanent humps. So we are actually going to be installing temporary humps this summer at those 2 locations, same number, same location. So we're going to have a testing temporary humps. So they're going to be going through a pilot program through next year with temporary humps, and then they will proceed to get the permanent humps towards the summer of next year. So to kind of give you an idea of the picture of what the work plan is over the next year. So again, the big items of the work plan are the phase 1 Lake Murray, the phase 2 Bob and Jesse, and the phase 3s of Lois and Dugan, with the application that temporary hump program is also being in a pilot program. And there will be opportunities, again, over this next year, we're going to look at opportunities for the temporary hump program. Again, that's new. We're going to pilot that through. We're going to see what the pros and cons, primarily from feedback from both Lois and Dugan, but also how we're going to prioritize temporary humps. Obviously, there's been a lot of community interest. We only have we have a finite amount of finances available to do all these. We also have a perception issue in terms of where do we do them, or prioritize. So that's something we're going to bring back to this commission too, as we begin to take those studies more into consideration of this next year. I know that was a lot, and I know I tried to run through it quickly. With that, I'll take any questions you've got.
Okay, I'm sure we're going to have some. Commissioner Nichols?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
Not yet, okay.
Anybody else? Commissioner McLeese?
I'm close to Highwood, and I noticed the channeling raised curbs. And right now, nighttime drivers see the retroreflectivity of the delineators, and when those are removed, I don't see any like glass beading painting in the curb line towards motorists, or any kind of nighttime visualization to show the encroachment in the roadway. So I'm just curious about how that will be handled.
Sure. So there is a striping plan. It hasn't all been installed yet. I don't know, Brianda, if you want to come up, do we have a timeline on that yet, on the striping for the edge lines? Sorry.
Thank you for your question, Commissioners. We don't yet have a striping plan that I can get back to you on, but I really thank you for your feedback on the nighttime visibility. So far, we don't have plans to remove the current, they're red object markers around the chicanes. So while we do have the concrete curing and everything, they'll remain. However, we'll ensure that we'll have reflectivity in the meantime, while the striping does come into effect around probably the first week of June at the latest. But I'll keep you posted with any other updates. If you have any other questions about Highwood or El Paso, I'll be glad to take them now too.
And Brianda, I believe we're going to have chevrons in those islands as well. So there will be
Yeah.
reflective chevrons. Those are the little arrows
Yeah,
on both
so
sides, as well as the
thank
white
you.
edge lines, because we do want to guide them through this. We want to alert them as much, and I especially appreciate the nighttime concerns. But that's so we can make them sort of meander through there at a slower pace.
Yeah, thank you. The object markers are about 3 feet height, and they get mounted on top of the 6-inch curb. So that adds to the visibility on top of the pavement markers that have glass beading with reflectivity. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I had, Commissioner Nichols?
I kind of trying to put together this stuff. First off, I think you've done an awesome job, especially on the El Paso section of that. That already is a vast improvement, and I look forward to the roundabout and things like that. So I really just wanted to commend you on that part of it. I'm still leery of the chicanes along Highwood, but, you know, we'll go with it and see how that one works out as far as for a cyclist. My issue is a cyclist going uphill. They travel relatively slow unless you've got one of those new e-bikes and that sort of thing.
Commissioner, I will point out something that we did a little bit different. Staff tried to be a little proactive on those chicanes. We know they're new. We know they're on a slope. We know there's some challenges to those chicanes. We also used those types of curbing, for those of you who don't know the construction, we used pin-on curbing at that location. So if this becomes a challenge or the neighborhood doesn't like it, this isn't something where we have to completely demo the whole street to remove it. So we did want to let you know, we tried to be a little more thoughtful and proactive on the street with this particular new type of traffic calming measure. It's solid and safe, but at the same time, it's something that if the community at some future point is no longer happy with, we have options that we may have not had in the past.
I would like to add as well that our streets crew is adding extra signage at the extremities of the project site to alert drivers that there's an upcoming traffic change while the construction is ongoing, while the speed table gets installed, and that way it'll help drivers get used to these new patterns on the road.
All right. And finally, the section along Lake Murray, which is between the place where there's not accessible for a bikeway without first off, thank you for putting in the chevrons. That I'm sure helps to some extent. And I am fully aware of your challenges on that. And that's going to be a definite challenge as far as that goes. One of the strange things about that little section is that it is uphill in both directions, depending on where you're at, and the narrowness of it creates monumental challenges for you. And if you need any device, by all means, contact me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just had one or two quick little questions. You were talking about the temporary speed humps, and that, it sounds like, is officially part of Phase 3?
That's a good question, Commissioner. So it's going to be a Phase 1 element going forward. It's so the plan of the temporary humps, and I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm sorry I didn't bring that up, is the plan, at least from council's viewpoint, was that I can implement them at a Phase 1 level. So eventually the goal is we may have to play catch up. Keep in mind, probably the matrix will still be the priority, right? The streets that have been waiting will have that first option. But the eventual goal is that I can implement those. They're still going to probably need a residential vote. I don't see how you need to make sure you had some kind of concurrence in the neighborhood, but the plan is to eventually be able to address them in a Phase 1.
Well, that'll be interesting and get you
Yeah.
further down the road, bad pun intended, sooner than expected.
Yes.
When you were talking about the quadrants and you had listed whether it was 7 miles per hour over the speed limit or 50% higher than the volume targets, what are the volume targets? Are they published somewhere or?
They are. So it's 50%. So it's about 1,500 vehicles. When you exceed the 1,500 vehicles per day, or the ADT, then you're triggering off. So where this would really change is, say, a local street.
So that-
Cul-de-sacs get in the hundreds of vehicles a day. Even most residential streets don't hit that number. But if you've got this street that's in that collector zone, kind of minor collector zone, that's where we really have to be a little more careful and look at our numbers. We may even go back and put hoses out just to concur that those numbers are what the numbers are, because obviously neighborhoods change.
Okay. So the 1,500 is like the target for any residential street
Yeah.
throughout the whole city?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we look at two particular numbers, 750 and 1,500. Those are our two little threshold numbers we look at.
Thank you.
Oh.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none? Did you want us to make a
Yeah.
separate approvals on this?
It would be a recommendation and a second for just a recommended approval. All you're doing is recommending this to city council for their approval.
Okay. So with that, we'll make the recommendation to send this as is to city council for their approval.
Yes.
So that'll be actually my motion. Just looking for a second.
I'll second.
Okay, we got a motion for recommending to City Council in a second. Let's go ahead and vote.
Chair Calandra, how do you vote?
Aye?
Commissioner Justice, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Mueller, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Nichols, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Sumner, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Covello, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner McLeese, how do you vote?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Okay, good, thank you. We'll look forward to see how City Council takes that. Getting back to our agenda, next up, just wanted to see if we have any staff and/or commissioner announcements today. Commissioner Justice?
I just had a couple quick questions. Can somebody let us know what the status is on the upgrade of the Costco gas expansion, new parking? I swear not a week goes by, people are calling me and saying, why is it such a mess? And it's Costco, right? And it's a small parking lot, right? But I'm just curious. It'd be nice to know that there's something going to happen eventually to kind of ease up on the traffic and the frustrations.
Commissioner, they haven't given us a hard date yet. There's been rumors of summer, but there is no hard date. And what I'll do is I'll make a note here to follow up with you next month on that. Just make a note.
Okay,
So
thanks.
I'll reach out to the planner on that.
And then the other question that was posed to me that I had never even heard was, how does one go about having a block party where you actually close off streets? Does that even happen in La Mesa? And is there a permit process that people have to go through?
Yeah, there is. You can go to our front counter and ask for an encroachment party.
At Public Works?
Yeah.
Okay.
You just right here to City Hall, and you
Oh,
can
okay.
go to the front and ask for
All
a
right, I'll
party.
let them know.
Uh-huh.
They asked me and I was like, oh. Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else? Commissioner Nichols?
We are entering into May, which is traditionally Bike Month, and I encourage all to get out and ride a bike a little bit. In fact, I believe that the city of La Mesa will be hosting a Bike to Anywhere booth, as they have in the past. And if someone help me correct, is it May 16th? Is it someplace in that general range? But hopefully you all hear about Bike to Anywhere and get out there and participate. The second thing is a quick question or an alert or whatever. I was along Murray Drive with the Class 4. I'm planning on going back there after this meeting to see if there's anything been done to it. But virtually every one of the standards that was separating the parked cars from the bikeway are off. And somebody has walked along, I'm assuming a pedestrian or possibly a city person, and set them back up almost where they were once glued down. But I'm sure that those will come down very easily once again. So either the epoxy used was not right or something was going on with it. Just alerting you to that. And I will fill out something to get it done, but I wanted to let you guys know.
Commissioner, yeah, thank you. We did get a notice, so we put in a request, but thank you for re-alerting us. We will get those raised candles back up and installed.
Bollards, yes.
Yes, thank you.
Flexible post.
Flexible, yes.
Commissioner Nichols, I looked up Bike Anywhere Day. I believe it's the 21st.
Oh, thank you.
Really? Okay, well, I thought it was earlier, but that works.
At least that's what Sandag says.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
they would know more than I.
All right, anybody else? All right, well, seeing none, our next scheduled meeting is June 4th, 2026. And actually, I will lead the Pledge of Allegiance and the invocation for that one. And with that, we are adjourned today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.
I figured you took it from somewhere else because I was like, so I'll show you. Well, I couldn't get into it. So when you looked in the street maintenance program, under transitions, it wouldn't let go of the after. So after 1 second, I couldn't control it. So I tried to look it up. So I just wanted to let you know. Oh, 700 inch. Got it. I'm not the inch drive. Let me take a jump. All right, 700 inch. Oh, it's in yours? You have your own one, and you put it in injured? No, you put it in this one. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. So see how it's grayed out? I couldn't override it. It isn't set. So that let's look at that later. But just let's find out what's going on. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Do you want location?
I can read off it first,
Yeah.
and then, I can
Absolutely. So I'll do a line is on I just need to make sure.
says add stop signs to the east and west down lanes of El Paso Street at the intersection of Cobb Street. El Paso is around our station at the descending hillside. Vehicles travel at high rates of speed in a residential neighborhood that has many pedestrians throughout the entire day. In addition, there are many cyclists, commuters that ride bikes on these streets that are at a higher risk of vehicle traveling at high rates of speed.
You're the overseer in my stat.
Yeah, I don't. No, that was straight. But I just want to make sure I'm all. Okay. I'll have Christina follow up with you. Okay. We'll look at studying that. I may have a study on that already, but either way, we'll make sure we get the information. Okay. So I'll make sure that Vivian and Christina will reach out. So I'll have her maybe send a confirmation email. We're looking into it. I'll do a another email with ballpark.
Good meeting. Thank you. Bye.
Well, they moved to this week they moved me. I'm no longer in City Hall. I've been moved out of City Hall. They sent me I'm over in the operations building.
Over on Center?
I'm over in Center.
Oh, wow.
So they just moved over. They put me over. I'm on the far corner. I'm next to, actually, I'm shocked. But I have a door this time, so I don't have everyone who can run in and yell at me like at one point. So.
I have to call Jacob at, Ops, 'cause, yeah, he's been contacted with pedestrian wise.
Give him as much a hard time as you like.
Well, I did.
Wait.
He got something else on me.
Good.
And I'm
No,
like,
he does. And I just want to warn you, Bishop, when you turn around, please watch.
oh, yes, I know.
I've seen
We need to
too
have
many
the,
bad. We need to
little
deal with that.
special thing. Yeah. Yeah, well, actually, that might be nice
I've only been there one day, so I can't.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, next month I'll give you one.
All good. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Mr. Fairwell.
Yeah, I gotta
Great,
move.
appreciate it.
I guess it's a demotion, but it's a demotion kind of out, But it's not what I'm complaining about. Just if you have a chance, the next meeting is the meeting that you're concerned about. So, if you give you 3 minutes, I suggest you do so.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
I don't know where it's gonna go, Commissioner. They kept me out of that one. We're never gonna be.
I meant to say something and
No, it's all right. It was I'll just tell you flat out, it was a council initiated item. They don't have to bring this to commission, nor do they feel compelled. It was written, the report was actually written with the manager's office. We assisted them on, we basically, I'll tell you that our own advice, they asked for it, was that they don't do much different than all the rest of the jurisdictions are going to do, but look at all of them, and Trellis has already done theirs, it was theirs. I said, but just, I think outreach maybe wasn't something that the council members felt like we could have done more on. It'll be brought up at the next meeting. I'm going to stay out. Staying out of it until I'm pulled back into it. But it's a chart. It's a ball.
it's a tough call.
It is a very tough call. I don't think we wanted to necessarily get into it, but
Yeah, as a cyclist, I get buzzed by vehicles going 15 to 20 miles faster, and I don't like slow.
I've seen you along the road.
You see me?
I've seen you. I was worried about speed limit there for a couple times, but in all seriousness, yeah, this is 12 to 16, 15-year-old is not easy. It's civil rights. It's rights versus.
Some cities have done permitted things for you to park like at their school. Again, you can teach it anything you want, whether it's not here.
That's right.
Question. But my opinion of all of that is that it's the illegal e-bikes that are out there that is the big problem.
I think it'd be good if you post that, just so I don't want you to have to regret not letting them know that. So just it's a
That's a national concern.
It is.
There's a lot of work being done to correct that.
Please take care.
Thank you for the book as well. It is a 2014, but from what I looked at, it's very upscale for 2014.
Oh, you might take a look at it. They have a newer version, but I didn't see much change in it. I went online. Look, sweet. Thank you.
All right, have a good day.
You too.
Take care.
Michael, thank you again.
Looking forward to a whole new team this year.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. It will be interesting. I mean, yeah, having two Europeans, at least that's all we have. No, yeah, this will be interesting. It's a different world, Michael, isn't it?